Our miracle this week that we're looking at is about a man who was born blind. It's in John chapter 9. It actually covers most of the chapter, so I'm going to read most of the chapter for us. John chapter 9 from verse 1. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said this, he spat on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and washed, and he came home seeing. His neighbours and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." "Now, how then were your eyes open?" they demanded. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to the pool of Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I can see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner do such miraculous signs?" So they were divided. Finally they turned again to the blind man. "What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." The man replied, "He is a prophet." The Jews still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight, and so they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it now that he can see?" "We know he is our son," the parents answered, "and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. "Give glory to God," they said. "We know this man is a sinner." He replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, and now I see." Then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciples. We are the disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now, that is remarkable. You don't know where this man came from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly man who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me, so that I may believe in him." Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Quite a long reading, quite a lot of different things going on. If you look at the context that this miracle happened in, Jesus is already in difficulties. Some people would argue, if you look back at chapter 8, you can see that he's in a way on the run from Jerusalem. He's been making some claims about himself, and he's been persecuted, and things are not going very well. And on the way, he comes to this place and he comes across this man born blind. Now, the disciples draw this out as an illustration, because they say to him, Jesus, then, whose fault is it that this man was born blind? Is it his fault? Is it his parents' fault? Who is it that sinned? And Jesus said, well, it wasn't the man and it wasn't his parents, but actually he's blind so that the glory of God, or the work of God, might be displayed in his life. Perhaps we can talk about it later. What do we think that means? How is the glory of God displayed in his life? How is the glory of God displayed in our lives today? So Jesus heals the man. We're back to that spitting, and he makes some mud and he puts it on the man's eyes, sends him to wash, and he gets his sight back. And if the miracle ended there, it would just be a lovely story with a happy ending. But it isn't, because when these things happen, there is a response from the people. And John gives us the response of several people. First, he has a response of the neighbours. Some of them want to say, this isn't really the man who was born blind, who we used to see begging. It must be somebody else. And the man says, no, it's me. The man who they call Jesus made some mud and he put it on my eyes. He has a very simple and yet a very powerful testimony, and that is repeated on and on through this story. I don't know how we are with testimonies, but perhaps sometimes we make things too complicated. This man I once used as a text, very simple text really. He said, what I do know is I was blind and now I see. And that really absolutely changed his life. So they take the man to the Pharisees, because of course we're back to healing on the Sabbath. This is a recurrent theme throughout quite a few miracles, as we've seen. Now, the ones that get reported are the ones that Jesus does on the Sabbath, because they are the ones that upset the religious leaders. So the Pharisees go and they interview the man, and well, that's fine. But the Pharisees are a little bit divided about how to respond to this. Some of them say, well, this man can't be from God because he doesn't keep the Sabbath. Others, well, they're not quite so certain. So this miracle divides the Pharisees, really. We don't hear very much about the Pharisees that believed in Jesus, but there's inklings throughout the Gospels of them. Joseph of Arimathea, possibly, Nicodemus, possibly, were in this sort of group. So the Pharisees are very divided. So in order to try and get a little bit more about what's going on, they decide they'll go and talk to the man's parents. And so they go and ask him. They say, what's happened to your son? Is this your son? And they say, well, yes, he is our son, but we don't really know how he got his eyesight back. What a strange thing to say. Haven't they asked him? Wouldn't you have been, if it had been your son, wouldn't the first thing you'd have said is, what's happened to you? Tell me what's gone on. So I think the parents knew. But the trouble was, the Jews had already decided that anyone who comes to faith in Jesus is going to be put out of the synagogue. And obviously the parents are worried about this. So they don't want to get put out of the synagogue. So they send the Pharisees back to the man. And the man, of course, really asked them a really he makes a really great statement to them. He says to them in the end, do you want to become his disciples too? Well, that was not going to go down well. So it goes on to say they heard insults at him and said, we follow Moses. And then, of course, they excommunicated him. They kicked him out of the synagogue. But that's not the end of the story, because the end of the story is that Jesus goes and finds this man. And when he's found him, he asks him, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man says, well, who is he? And Jesus says to him, it's me. And the man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. So it has a really nice ending to it, really. So this is a miracle, and it is about a miracle about healing. Yet it's also about how different groups of people respond to Jesus, and how fear and vested interests, how that affects how people respond to the gospel message. And I hope we'll find a few things in it to discuss as we chat together in a minute.